The silver ships appeared in Earth skies on a Tuesday morning, their hulls gleaming like polished mirrors against the blue atmosphere. Dr. Kim Asujin was grading papers in her small office at Seoul National University when the first broadcasts began. Students rushed past her window, pointing upward and shouting in excitement. She set down her red pen and walked to the window. Above the city, massive vessels hung motionless in the air, their surfaces smooth and perfect. They were beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten with unease. The alien delegation landed in Yoido Park, and within hours, the entire world was watching. The beings that emerged were tall and elegant, their skin catching the light like oil on water. They moved with fluid grace, their faces kind and wise. People of Earth, their leader spoke, his voice somehow reaching every corner of the globe in perfect languages. We are the hegemony. We have traveled far to reach you, drawn by your potential and your struggles. We come not as conquerors, but as guides. The crowds cheered. Politicians wept. Religious leaders called it a miracle. But Dr. Kim felt cold fingers crawl up her spine. She knew this script. She had read it in dusty archives and colonial records, in the testimonies of conquered peoples. The same words, the same promises, the same gentle smiles that preceded centuries of suffering. We have watched your species with great interest, the alien continued. Your wars, your pain, your desperate search for meaning. We have guided countless civilizations before you, lifting them from darkness into light. The alien gestured, and holographic displays filled the air. Images of gleaming cities, healthy people, technology beyond imagination. We offer you cures for your diseases, solutions to your energy crisis, an end to hunger and war. All we ask is that you trust us to guide you. President Park stepped forward, his hands shaking as he accepted a crystalline device. On behalf of humanity, we accept your guidance, he said, his voice breaking with emotion. The celebration began immediately. Fireworks exploded over Seoul. People danced in the streets. The aliens smiled their gentle smiles and began distributing small devices that could heal cuts and cure headaches. But Dr. Kim was already moving, her historian's mind racing through patterns she recognized too well. She grabbed her coat and hurried toward the nearest library, her phone buzzing with calls from excited colleagues. Across the city, Captain Lee Jinwoo stood in his office at the military base, watching the celebrations on his monitor. Leader had made a specific request during the private meeting with world leaders. All military forces should stand down for the transition period. Sir, his aide, Lieutenant Park, stood in the doorway. The aliens have requested access to our weapon systems. They say it's for our protection. Lee's jaw tightened. 20 years of military service had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct screamed danger. Tell them we need time to process the request through proper channels, they said. It was urgent, sir, for global security. Everything is urgent with new management, Lee muttered. Remembering his grandfather's stories about the Japanese occupation, send the message anyway. As night fell over Seoul, the city transformed. The aliens had erected temporary structures that glowed with soft light, providing free medical care and food to anyone who asked. Lines of grateful citizens stretched. 4 blocks, Dr. Kim sat in her apartment, surrounded by books and printouts. The more she read about the hegemony's arrival, the more familiar it became. The promise of guidance, the gifts that created dependency, the subtle discouragement of independent thought. She opened her laptop and began typing a message to her contacts around the world, other historians, anthropologists, anyone who might recognize the pattern she was seeing. Does anyone else? Notice the similarities, she wrote. The language, the approach, the timeline. I've seen this before. We all have. Meanwhile, Captain Lee was making his own quiet preparations. He sent coded messages to trusted military contacts in other countries. Men and women who had served in conflicts where the enemy used deception and false promises. Keep your eyes open, he told them. Something doesn't feel right. The aliens worked through the night, their technology transforming the city with impossible speed. Diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries simply vanished. Energy became free and abundant. The floating cities they had promised began to rise from the ground. But with each miracle, Dr. Kim noticed something else. The aliens subtly discouraged certain types of questions. They redirected conversations away from topics like human history and culture. They smiled when people talked about the future, but their eyes went cold when anyone mentioned the past. "Prefer to focus on what lies ahead," they would say. "The past is full of pain and confusion. Let us guide you toward clarity." By dawn, the world had changed. Humanity had new masters, though they called themselves guides. The celebration continued, but in quiet corners of the city, a historian and a soldier were beginning to remember lessons their species had learned the hard way. The hegemony had come to Earth with promises of guidance and gifts of technology, but they had made one crucial mistake. They had chosen to guide a species that had spent 10,000 years learning to recognize the difference between salvation and subjugation. The test was about to begin, and humanity's greatest teachers would be their own painful memories. 6 months had passed since the silver ships arrived. The world looked like a dream come true. The floating cities above Seoul glowed with soft light, their gardens hanging in midair like something from a fairy tale. Cancer had become a word from history books. The elderly walked with the strength of youth. Hunger was a forgotten memory. Dr. Kim Soo-jin should have been happy. Instead, she felt sick to her stomach as she walked through the university campus. The students moved differently now, their faces calm and empty. They spoke in the same gentle tones as their alien guides, using the same phrases about cosmic harmony and universal truth. Professor Kim, one of her former students, approached her after class. "Why do you still teach about the old wars? The guides say we should focus on moving forward, not dwelling on past conflicts." Kim forced a smile. "History helps us understand patterns, Ji-hoon. It teaches us to think critically." The student's face showed confusion, but the guides provide all the answers we need. Critical thinking just creates chaos and division. After the student left, Kim hurried to her basement office where she had been conducting her real research. Her assistant Minho was already there. Hunched over stacks of documents they had managed to access from the alien databases. "Professor, look at this," Minho whispered, his voice shaking. "I found records of the Vorthok civilization. The hegemony guided them for 50 years. They built floating cities, cured diseases, achieved perfect harmony. And then," Kim asked, though she already knew the answer, "nothing. They just disappeared." The records say they achieved final integration and became part of the greater cosmic order. Kim's blood ran cold. How many others? Minho's hands trembled as he turned the pages. Dozens. The Zirathi, the Mollans, the Kethra, all guided to enlightenment. All gone. Across the city, Captain Lee Jinwoo crouched in an abandoned subway tunnel, speaking quietly into a radio. His underground network had grown carefully over the past 6 months, recruiting soldiers, engineers, and civilians who still remembered how to think for themselves. "Phoenix team, report," he whispered. "Supply cache in Busan is secure," came the reply. "But we lost contact with the group in Daegu. They missed 3 check-ins." Lee's jaw tightened. People were disappearing, not obviously, not violently, but quietly. It's those who asked too many questions, who refused the voluntary optimization programs, who clung too strongly to old ways of thinking. His second-in-command, Sergeant Park Mi-young, crawled through the tunnel toward him. "Sir, we intercepted alien communications. They're not just watching our internet and phones. They're actively blocking our space program." "What do you mean?" "Every rocket launch, every satellite deployment, every attempt to look beyond Earth's atmosphere gets redirected or fails. They're keeping us trapped here, sir, like animals in a cage." Lee nodded grimly. It was the oldest trick in the oppressor's handbook. Control information, limit movement, create dependency. His grandfather had told him stories about the Japanese occupation, how they had used similar tactics to control Korea. "They don't want us to see what's beyond the bars," he muttered. Above ground, the alien city pulsed with hypnotic patterns. Citizens gathered in the streets below, their faces upturned in worship. The hegemony's daily guidance sessions had become religious ceremonies, with humans repeating mantras about unity and cosmic purpose. Dr. Kim watched from her office window as her own colleagues joined the crowds. Professor Jung, who had once been famous for his sharp debates, now spoke only in soothing platitudes. Dr. Yoon, who had written books about Korean independence, now taught classes about the primitive nature of cultural identity. They're not being controlled, she realized with horror. They're being absorbed. In her basement, Minho had found more disturbing evidence. "Professor, look at these population reports. The birth rate has dropped by 60%. The aliens say it's part of the optimization program, but a species that can't reproduce is a species that's dying," Kim finished. The pieces were falling into place. The hegemony didn't conquer worlds through violence. They absorbed them slowly, like a snake swallowing its prey. They made their victims grateful for the process. Late that night, as Kim walked home through the eerily quiet streets, she noticed something that made her heart race. The alien city above Seoul was changing. Its lights, usually soft and golden, were shifting to a deep red. The glow reminded her of blood. Her phone buzzed with an emergency alert. Every screen in the city lit up simultaneously, showing the serene face of the hegemony's leader. "Citizens of Earth," the alien spoke in his perfect, emotionless voice. "You have made excellent progress in your journey toward cosmic harmony. The time has come for the next phase of your evolution." Kim's hands shook as she realized what was happening. The gentle guidance period was over. The real horror was about to begin. "Tomorrow, we will commence final integration," the alien continued. "Do not be afraid. You will join the eternal consciousness of the hegemony. Your individual suffering will end. Your species will achieve perfect unity." The broadcast ended, leaving the city in darkness except for the red glow from above. In the shadows, Dr. Kim Soo-jin and Captain Lee Jin-woo were already moving, their separate paths about to converge in humanity's desperate fight for survival. The golden age was over. The real test was just beginning. Dr. Kim Soo-jin sat in her hidden basement office, surrounded by papers and glowing computer screens. Her hands trembled as she arranged the evidence that would change everything. For weeks, she had been digging through the alien databases, finding pieces of a terrible puzzle. "Oh, look at this," she whispered to her assistant, pointing at a document on her screen. The hegemony arrived on the planet Xeris, exactly like they arrived here. First, they offered cures for diseases, then they built floating cities. Then they started changing the education system. Minho leaned closer, his face pale in the blue light. "What happened to the Xeris people? They vanished. Completely. The records say they achieved cosmic unity and joined the eternal consciousness. But there's no trace of their culture there. Language, their art, nothing." Kim pulled up another file. The Mollans, the Kethra, the Vorthok, all the same pattern. The hegemony arrives as saviors, slowly takes control, then absorbs the entire species. "But Professor, we're different, right?" "We've seen this before," Kim nodded, her eyes burning with determination. "That's exactly right. We've fought colonizers before. We know their tricks." She turned to face a small camera hidden behind a stack of books. Minho had helped her set up a secret broadcast system that could reach resistance groups around the world. "My name is Dr. Kim Soo-jin," she began, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'm a historian, and I need to tell you something important. The hegemony are not our guides. They are predators." She held up printouts of the alien records. "They have done this to dozens of species across the galaxy. They arrive with gifts and promises. They make us dependent on their technology. They slowly destroy our culture and replace it with their own. And then they absorb us completely." The camera captured her words as she continued. "But here's what they didn't count on. We humans have experience with this. We've seen colonizers before. We know how they operate, and we know how to fight back. Across the city, Captain Lee Jinwoo watched Kim's broadcast on a small screen in his underground command center. The resistance had grown far beyond his original expectations. What started as a few suspicious soldiers had become a global network of fighters, engineers, and ordinary citizens who refused to surrender their freedom. "She's right," he told his team. "They're using the same playbook that every oppressor in history has used, but they picked the wrong species to try it on." Sergeant Park Mayung entered the room carrying a modified alien weapon.
We've
"Figured out how their shield technology works. Our engineers have been reverse engineering their equipment for months." Lee smiled grimly. "Good. What else do we have? Up in caches in 57 cities worldwide. Communication networks that they can't track. So most importantly, we have people who remember how to fight dirty." Lee's grandfather had been a guerrilla fighter during the Korean War. He used to tell stories about how small groups of determined fighters could defeat much larger, better equipped armies. The secret was to avoid fighting the enemy's strengths and attack their weaknesses instead. "They expect us to fight like the other species they conquered," Lee said. "Organized armies, formal battles, surrender when we're outnumbered. But humans don't fight that way." Above them, the alien city pulsed with red light. The hegemony's voice echoed across the planet. "Citizens of Earth, final integration will commence in 72 hours. Prepare yourselves for unity with the eternal consciousness." But in basements and abandoned buildings around the world, humans were preparing for something very different. Dr. Kim continued her broadcast, her voice growing stronger. "They studied our technology. They learned about our governments and our militaries. But they didn't understand our history. They didn't realize that we've been fighting this exact battle for thousands of years." She pulled up images on her screen. "When the Mongols invaded Korea, we fought back. When the Japanese occupied our country, we resisted. When European powers carved up Africa and Asia, people fought for their freedom. Every time someone claimed to be civilizing us, we learned their tricks and found ways to defeat them." Added, "The hegemony think they're dealing with a primitive species. They don't realize that our primitive history is actually our greatest weapon." Kim nodded. "We've learned that colonizers always use the same methods. They divide us against each other. They make us dependent on their gifts. They convince us that their way is the only way forward. But we've seen through these lies before." BROADCAST reached resistance cells in every major city. Former soldiers who had fought in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq recognized the patterns. Engineers who had grown up hearing stories about World War II understood what needed to be done. Ordinary citizens who had studied history in school suddenly realized that their ancestors had prepared them for this moment. Captain Lee stood up, his command team around him. 72 hours, he said. "That's how long we have to save our species, but we're not going to fight their fight. We're going to fight the way humans have always fought when facing extinction." He looked at each of his officers. "We're going to be unpredictable. We're going to hit them where they don't expect it. And we're going to show them that humans are the one species in the galaxy that never learned how to stay conquered." The resistance was ready. The hegemony had made a fatal mistake. They had tried to guide a species that had spent 10,000 years learning to recognize the difference between salvation and slavery. The message spread faster than the hegemony could stop it. Dr. Kim Soo-jin's broadcast jumped from hidden radio to secret internet connection, from encrypted phone call to whispered conversation. Within hours, millions of humans around the world had heard the truth. In a small apartment in Tokyo, an elderly woman named Tanaka remembered her grandmother's stories about the war. She picked up her phone and called her neighbors. A young engineer named Adebayo recalled his grandfather's tales of fighting colonial rule. He sent messages to his university friends. In New York, a teacher named Martinez thought about her family's escape from oppression decades ago. She gathered her students in secret. The awakening was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet, personal, and unstoppable. Dr. Kim stood in her basement office, watching her computer screen as reports flooded in from around the world. People were remembering. People were acting. People were refusing to accept the hegemony's lies, Professor Minho said, his voice filled with wonder. Look at this messages from every continent. We're all saying the same thing. Kim read the messages on her screen. We recognize this pattern. Our ancestors fought this before. We know how to resist. Cross Seoul, Captain Lee Jinwoo felt the change in the air. His communicator crackled with reports from resistance. Cells worldwide. The time for hiding was over. All units, this is Ember Command. He spoke into his radio. The truth is out. Operation Liberation begins now. Above the city, the alien vessels began to transform. Their beautiful silver surfaces split open, revealing mechanical weapons and scanning equipment. The gentle guides were gone, replaced by something cold and threatening. The hegemony's true forms emerged from their ships. They were no longer the graceful beings who had arrived 6 months ago. Their bodies were twisted combinations of metal and flesh, their eyes glowing with artificial light. They moved with mechanical precision, their voices now harsh and commanding. Citizens of Earth, the alien commander's voice boomed across the planet. You will cease this resistance immediately. Your integration into the hegemony is not optional. Act. Humanity was already moving in the sewers beneath Seoul. Sergeant Park Myung crawled through the darkness with her strike team. Her grandfather had been a guerrilla fighter during the Korean War. She remembered every story he had told her about fighting enemies with superior weapons. Stay low, move fast. Hit them where they don't expect it, she whispered to her team. They're used to species that fight fair. We're going to fight smart. Around the world, similar scenes played out. In London, former soldiers used tactics learned in Afghanistan to attack alien supply lines. In Mumbai, engineers who had studied the independence movement sabotaged alien communication systems. In Snow Paulo, civilians who remembered their grandparents. Stories about resisting dictatorships organized neighborhood defense groups. The hegemony had prepared for many things, but they had not prepared for this. They expected formal armies, organized governments, predictable military responses. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered, a species that had learned to fight back through thousands of years of oppression. Overlord Dex materialized in the central plaza of Seoul, his form now revealed as a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical parts. His voice carried across the city through speakers embedded in every building. Your resistance is futile, he announced. We have guided civilizations for 10,000 years. We have absorbed hundreds of species. You cannot defeat us. Dr. Kim Soo-jin stepped out of her hiding place and walked into the plaza. Oh, she was no longer the quiet academic who had trembled in her basement office. Her voice was steady and strong as she faced the alien commander. You're right, she said. We can't defeat you with superior technology. We can't match your weapons or your ships. But we have something you don't understand. The alien's mechanical eyes focused on her. What is that primitive creature? We have been resisting oppression for just as long as you have been practicing it. The difference is, we learn from every defeat, every victory, every sacrifice. You only learned how to consume. Around the plaza, humans emerged from buildings and alleyways. They carried weapons they had built from alien technology, tactics. They had learned from their ancestors, and a determination that surprised even themselves. You made a mistake, Kim continued. You chose to target a species that has spent its entire history learning to recognize lies. We've seen your promises before, we've heard your words before, and we've learned how to fight back. The battle began, not with a single gunshot or explosion, but with 1,000 small acts of defiance. Humans attacked alien installations using guerrilla tactics that had been perfected over centuries. They sabotaged alien technology using knowledge passed down through generations. They coordinated their resistance using methods that had worked against every oppressor in human history for the first time in their existence. The hegemony faced a species that fought back not with superior technology, but with the wisdom of survival burned into their very DNA. They had absorbed civilizations that surrendered when overwhelmed. They had conquered species that fought predictable wars, but they had never encountered. Humans, a species that had learned to fight dirty, think creatively, and never accept defeat. The liberation of Earth had begun, and the hegemony was about To learn why humans had survived every challenge or violent history had thrown at them. The war for Earth had become a war for the galaxy. In command centers hidden deep beneath Seoul, Captain Lee Jinwoo watched screens showing battles on dozens of worlds. Dr. Kim Soo-jin's research had revealed something credible. The hegemony had left survivors on every planet they conquered, small pockets of beings who had refused to be absorbed. "Sir, we're receiving signals from the Xeris system," reported Lieutenant Park. "The survivors there are rising up. They're using the tactics we transmitted to them." Lee smiled grimly. "Good, what about the other worlds?" "All of them, sir. Single planet, where the hegemony left survivors, they're all fighting back." The captain turned to his staff officers. Men and women who had spent months learning how to fight an enemy with superior technology. "They thought they were facing primitives," he said. "They never understood that our primitive history was actually our greatest weapon." On the surface, Seoul burned with the light of battle. The alien city that had floated above the Han River for 6 months was now a fortress under siege. But this was not the kind of siege the hegemony understood. There were no neat battle lines, no formal armies, no predictable strategies. Sergeant Park My-young crept through the ventilation system of the alien command center, her grandfather's voice echoing in her memory. "When the enemy is strong, you don't fight him head-on. You find his weakness and strike there." The hegemony's weakness was their arrogance. They had ruled for so long that they had forgotten how to adapt to the unexpected. They expected humans to fight like every other species they had conquered, with honor, with rules, with predictable tactics. Instead, they got guerrilla warfare, perfected over 10,000 years of human conflict. "Phoenix team, we're in position," Park whispered into her communicator. Her team had spent 3 days crawling through maintenance tunnels, avoiding alien sensors, learning the layout of their command center. "Copy that," came Lee's voice. "You know what to do?" "Why?" Park's team moved with deadly precision. They had studied the alien technology for months, learned its weaknesses, turned its own systems against it. Within minutes, they had control of the hegemony's central database. "Captain, we have it," Park reported. "We're broadcasting liberation protocols to every world they've conquered." The effect was immediate and devastating. Across the galaxy, beings who had been absorbed into the hegemony's collective consciousness began to remember who they were. The aliens' greatest strength, their ability to suppress individual identity, became their weaknesses as billions of beings suddenly recalled their own cultures, their own histories, their own capacity for resistance. On the planet Xeris, the descendants of a proud warrior race remembered their battle songs. On Cathra, scientists who had been forced to work for the hegemony turned their knowledge against their oppressors. Gone, Milan artists who had been made to create only approved works began painting symbols of rebellion on every wall. Dr. Kim Soo-jin watched the liberation unfold from her position at Seoul National University. The alien city above the Han River was falling, its systems failing as the resistance struck at every critical point. She could see hegemony soldiers fleeing their posts, their coordination broken. "Professor, look at this," Minho said, pointing at his computer screen. "Messages from across the galaxy. Every species the hegemony conquered is fighting back." Kim nodded, tears streaming down her face. "They tried to erase those cultures, but you can't destroy the human spirit. And apparently, you can't destroy the spirit of any thinking being." The final confrontation came as the alien city began its death spiral toward the river. Overlord Dex materialized in the university courtyard, his form flickering with system failures. He was no longer the confident commander who had announced final integration. His mechanical parts sparked and smoked, his organic components withering. "Possible," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "We are the eternal guides. We have consumed 1,000 civilizations." Dr. Kim stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of humanity's long struggle. "And we are the species that survived colonization, slavery, genocide, and every other horror you can imagine. We didn't just survive, we learned, we adapted. We grew stronger." The alien commander's eyes dimmed. "You were supposed to be grateful. We offered you peace, unity, an end to your suffering." "We've heard those promises before," Kim replied. from every conqueror who ever claimed to be saving us. But we learned something you never did. Freedom isn't given, it's taken. And it's worth any price? As the alien city crashed into the Han River, Captain Lee's voice echoed across the galaxy through the captured communication systems. This is Earth to all free beings. The hegemony has fallen. We are not your conquerors. We are your liberators. Today, we take our place not as rulers, but as guardians of freedom. The war was over. But more than that, the galaxy was free for the first time in 10,000 years. Humanity had not just defeated the hegemony, they had liberated every world the aliens had conquered. Using the very lessons learned from their own dark history. In the ruins of the alien city, Dr. Kim Soo-jin picked up a piece of hegemony technology, imagining how it could be used to heal rather than harm, to build rather than destroy. The species that had been marked for consumption had instead become the catalyst for the greatest liberation in cosmic history. The guides had been guided to their own destruction by a species that had learned the true meaning of freedom through 10,000 years of fighting for it.